welcome to Lead Line, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Hello. Wherever you're at on this planet, much gratitude for joining us today to talk about a subject that's dear to me, and that is how cultures shape economics and justice. And we're going to go deep very quickly. We have two wonderful guests, and I'm going to tell you just the tip of the iceberg about them in terms of their bios, because one will have to leave a little bit early. So I wanted to share that with you on his behalf, but he'll be back to a subsequent show, and hopefully both of them will be. This topic is so important, and hopefully it is to all of us, because think about it. What is culture? Culture includes values. What's values? Respect, appreciation, integrity, collaboration. There's so many ways to identify how we interact, engage in the world around us. That's really culture. And a critical aspect of culture are the arts. I don't care what home you go into, whether it's a picture of loved ones, whether it is an extraordinary piece of art that someone created. Maybe it's extraordinary in the eye of the beholder, or society says this is a priceless piece of art that was purchased for millions of dollars. Art affects us, whether it's music, whether it is dance, whether it's some live orchestra or opera performance, certainly jazz, rhythm and blues. Can we imagine being in a society without music? Young people, oh my goodness, every generation creates a whole new genre that is so palpable and influential, not only to local culture, nationwide. It's used in advertising. And what is advertising if not leveraging aspects of culture to really make a transformative difference? And who need advertisers? Those who are taking advantage of working in the area of media. They need advertisers in order to pay for the delivery of their resources. So we'll talk about culture. We'll talk about economics. We'll talk about justice foremost, how to get to a place where we make the kind of transformation in culture, our values, our belief systems, the resources that we leverage, we create, and we share to actually ensure a level of justice that has embedded in it equity. It has embedded in it a clarity of valuing everyone, independent of origins and what they happen to be doing at the moment. So, who are these two gentlemen? Jeremy Liu and Randolph Belle. I absolutely love their spirits. Love these men for what they are about. They're not only are they professionals, you'll hear about that in a moment, they're also husbands, they're dads, and they take those responsibilities seriously. So that's why they navigate the world to a great degree the way they do. They want to ensure a legacy that not only is much leaves a society healthier, more responsible, and respected by those who are in it outside for their children, also for their grandchildren, and all the other children we've yet to even think about. So, Jeremy, who is this gentleman? He's managing director of Creative Development Partners, an investment in real estate development firm that is pioneering the creation of community benefits by design, ventures in hospitality and real estate. And he's doing this in sync with his partner, Randolph Belle, and other collaborators. He's a community development strategist, social entrepreneur, and real estate developer, obviously. He has served as the chief executive of two development and real estate social enterprises in Boston and here in the Bay Area. He managed assets that exceeded 200 million, a staff of 110, social services programs providing direct support to over 5,000 individuals and over dozens of properties, including 2,000 unit housing and 300 square foot of commercial space, and the development pipeline of 6 to 10 projects annually. So what is he? He's a strategist. He's recognized nationally in the community development space with community development corporations from a focus on the activity of housing, production, and service providing, to a performance focus on the social determinants of health. Get that? Led to similar shifts across the entire community development sector. He co founded Creative Ecology Partners, a design studio and incubator for economic and community development. I want to jump a little bit and share that he's currently the senior fellow at PolicyLink, leads an initiative to integrate arts and culture into equitable development, including health equity and policy change. He's co edited the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco Community Development Innovation Review issue, Transforming Community Development into through Arts and Culture. He co authored the PolicyLink report, Creating Change, Arts, Culture, and Equitable Development, and contributed chapters to the NEA, How to Do Creative Placemaking book, and the Rutledge Handbook of Placemaking. Randolph Belle is the owner of RBA Creative, a design, communications, and public affairs firm, principal of Creative Development Partner, a real estate development firm, and director of the nonprofit support Oakland Artist. He's a native of San Francisco, resided in Oakland for over 30 years. Primary focus of RBA Creatives currently consulting work includes stakeholder engagement activities and integrating art and sustainable community benefits into large-scale real estate and municipal projects. RBA Creative Office and Studio is in East Oakland. They serve as a co-working space, and there's many artists, photographers, and other creatives, and they've been there in commercial space for at least since 1991. They do quite a bit of remarkable work in on behalf of the community. And Randolph, in particular, has a legacy with the Oakland Film Society as an advisory board to the Crucible. Many of us find that resource invaluable as a space for artists, and community partner with the Black Cultural Zone and board member of the Oakland Indie Alliance. He has many past affiliations with Pro Arts and the Museum of Children Arts, and I can go on and on. He lives here, like Jeremy does, here in Oakland with his wife and two beautiful children. So at this time, I'd like to ask them both to come into the studio and introduce themselves. And Jeremy, if you will begin and share with us something that no one would know about you, can't find in social media, and Randolph to follow.
Yeah, hi, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
One thing I would say is that I'm an avid reader of speculative fiction and science fiction, especially written by authors of color. And that shouldn't be a huge surprise to many people who know me, but I also am not on that much social media, so probably people don't know that.
Wonderful. Randolph? I'm thinking about one of the remarkable Black sci-fi writers and thinkers and creators. She's no longer with us. And I'm wondering if you can intuit who I'm thinking about.
Oh yeah, Octavia Butler, no
Absolutely.
question.
Randolph?
The response is people wouldn't know that I actually sleep sometimes. Love it. You know, they're getting emails. Sometimes they're to you, Dr. Webb, at 3:00 in the morning. But other than that, really a lot of people, you know, I've been in Oakland for 30 years, and a lot of people just didn't know that I was an artist. I was a working artist, right? They knew me from nonprofits. They knew me from, you know, other things, and didn't know that I was actually, you know, I came to Oakland, you know, in 91 or so from San Francisco, and I was a working artist. That's what I did, just hustling up, you know, art. So, yeah.
And I didn't know, nor did Jeremy know, that the art behind you is yours. You created all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's quite amazing. Wonderful. So let's get in the heart of our subject matter. And I very, very powerful. So first thing I want you to do is describe why is community benefits by design a strategy? Why is it needed? And especially compared to what is a standard process in terms of real estate development.
Yeah, like, and I'll jump in. And again, apologies for having to leave, but when we came up with this, both Jeremy and I came from community development. Obviously, Jeremy running these large community development organizations, and me being so tied to nonprofits, the arts, and other community initiatives. But from strictly from a real estate development standpoint, really the kind of the strategy that that evil developer on TV that you see, it's baking in profits first and then negotiating away the benefits. And so what we were trying to do is figure out from a community development lens, how do you flip that model on its head, and how do you bake in community benefits with a sustainable business model? And so with that, kind of we put our heads together, and Jeremy has an arts background also. So it's always great kind of just riffing, around how we can sustainably do this without, grant support as the foundation for this, because we really want to make sustainable community benefits.
Thank you. Jeremy, you want to add anything to that? That's pretty significant.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just so that, because Randolph's a little modest, he was involved in some of the most significant community benefits agreements that have been negotiated in the entire Bay Area. And that's a deep experience about what might have been possible, or what could be possible with the status quo approach. I think drawing from that experience, drawing from my experience of, on the flip side, trying to develop communities through real estate and programs, we saw that a new approach was needed. And the fundamental piece that was missing, that we saw in the way most real estate development happens, is the missing purpose. We often talk about, again, in the mainstream approach, the mixed use developments, as if putting some retail underneath some housing and mixing the different uses is enough to satisfy the needs and desires of community. And our core point is that you have to develop with purpose, not just simply with different types of uses. But most fundamentally, as Randolph points out, most real estate development is done for the purpose of profit, and our goal is to make sure that it's done also with the purpose of community benefits.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that core to what you two expect to do is not just to go out there and build in collaboration with the community and literally have to shut down because you have no profit. So you're not talking about profits in and of themselves are bad. You're saying that the more powerful and impactful bottom line that pays itself forward is the community benefits. You have that at the center, and you, of course, have sound strategy to back that up. You will have profits, right?
So,
that's right.
Yeah. So profits are vital. They're crucial. You can't do it without profits, because then you can't afford to do the community benefits. So, the more sound a financial venture you have, the more then you have to share. And I think the sharing and the shared responsibility to the communities that are being developed is sometimes what is missing. So, what we're trying to do is really create a balance.
Okay, let's move a little bit, and then we're going to come back to this. So this was an interesting part of our conversation. A lot of folks who are developers, who are into economics, they understand the notion of unit economics. And if you can describe that briefly, Jeremy, that would be great. And then I want to shift and use a term, something that I think you put it together, and then I ran with it, and you're like, "Oh, that doesn't really exist." And I think it's a great idea. It's to talk about unit mutuality. So describe briefly what unit economics is and the power of unit mutuality.
Sure. unit economics is a pretty basic or not basic, but fundamental term in thinking about business, right? It's like, how much does it cost to produce one unit of whatever it is you produce, whether it's a square foot of commercial real estate, whether it's a single housing unit, so to speak, or a single apartment, or a single iPhone, right, or whatnot. And then also, how much can you profit from, or sell, or make from that one unit? It's in some ways the driving force, right, factor of thinking about how capitalism works, right? It's like, how much does it cost to make this thing? How much can I sell it for? And whatever's left over is how much I've made. When we talk about thinking about what our business model means for society, for economics, for community, we really think about mutuality, right? We think about how much every unit, not only certainly there's a unit economics to it, but also how much does every unit engender and support more mutual interconnectedness, more not codependency. I don't mean that. I mean sort of inter community relationships, intra-community relationships. How do we support? What is the ability of each unit to support community growth and community development? At the same time, it also means thinking about what is the unit and what's the right unit of measurement. Right. I think the unit mutuality piece, to me, has a lot to do with understanding the natural relations and obligations and responsibilities we feel to each other, and how do we operate at that scale. And one example I would use of that is our firm co-owns a commercial industrial laundry company in the Bay Area that serves the hospitality industry. And one thing that's just been so eye-opening for us as we bought this existing business and have steadily made improvements and transformations to both efficiency, but also improving the social conditions for the workers, the environmental conditions and the inputs and outputs needed for the plant. One of the most amazing things was learning about how basically all 30 employees know each other and are part of some extended social community family network, right? And the unit economics approach says, how many employees does it take to produce to serve 1 pound of mutuality approach thinks about what is the unit? It's not just one individual.
Can you restate that, because you were frozen for a moment?
Individual. It's not about the unit. I think that we started to talk about around unit mutuality is like, what is the unit that's at operation here? And it's actually not the individual employee one by one. It's actually this social unit that's actually forming the backbone of what this plant is all about. And understanding that means, how do we start to understand the way we approach our employee benefits, the way we start to approach how we relocate the plant. Like, we're not relocating just because we want to be more centrally located to all of our customers, but can we figure out how we can be relocated so that it really situates the needs of this social unit that is our employees as a whole, not just individually. How do they how do they travel to the company and the facility? Things like that I think just help us shift our thinking about how we plan for a sustainable business that actually generates community benefits through purpose.
Interesting.
Yeah, and how often do you hear such a thoughtful kind of approach to these issues, right? It's not often. A lot of times things are either nonprofit, they're for profit, right? That sort of thing. And what we're trying to do is figure out the most creative ways to use these market-based frameworks to address community-based problems.
Mm.
Some people call them social enterprises, B Corps, that sort of things. And
Mhm.
we kind of just see it as, you know, just making, perfect sense without, kind of the nomenclature. So yeah, that's what's been exciting about the work,
Mhm.
right? Because, we're able to work at the speed of business,
Mm.
right? In a way that nonprofits and government are not, right?
Interesting.
And it doesn't often happen on either side of the ledger, either business or public, that a group comes together with these varied and often countervailing skill sets.
You have to leave in a few moments. What comes to mind is a project that we don't need to be specific about. You can if you want to. Where, for example, there was an opportunity, and you two weighed in to go to the city government and say, "Okay, we've got a proposal to respond to your request for proposals." Another organization did the same thing. You built in community benefits by design. And not only that, you had an extraordinary plan. And I'm being humble. I value the two of you, but whether I value you or not, I would not say this if it wasn't so. You not only have that, you had backers that had written letters that were explicit. Yet, for whatever reason, the governmental agency, and we've got a lot of perspectives about it, I'm sure, those who are here with us and those who are not here. And that is that the decision was to go with another organization that has yet to provide community benefits. In fact, at least twice, if not three times, they failed to meet obligations. And they didn't have a thorough plan. Not only that, they didn't even have written backers financially. So, without going to all the details of that, how do you, and I'm saying this because people out there viewing, whether they're viewing in their via their television or they're viewing via Facebook or YouTube, or they'll see this in the future through the podcast, they're going to say, why go and create when you have all these challenges? You've got the best plan, you overdo it, you're people of color, and then you've got the establishment goes in there, doesn't even overdo it, doesn't even provide a plan, and they get the deal. So how do you continue to move forward? Because you were somewhat in your infancy, and yet you didn't allow that to deter you. You stayed focused, and now you are producing, while the other organization is using the structure, and there's been no benefits for the community.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
so like a very easy way to address that is just how we approach the project, right?
Mhm.
Everything that you have said makes perfect sense,
Mhm.
right? It makes sense to create a sound business model. It makes sense to have community engagement and participation and support prior to. It makes sense to bring in different institutions like the Laney College, Peralta Colleges, higher ed. All of those things make sense, but the only thing that never makes sense is money and politics, right?
Mhm.
Those are X factors that literally just don't make sense because they're not predictable. We did some very, very predictable planning around this thing, and that's kind of driven what it is that we are kind of pursuing moving forward. And so ever since then, since the original plan back in 93 or whatever, no, what was it?
2000. And
2013,
yeah.
we have been working on building a teaching hotel, right? That's what we're doing with embedded community benefits, just based on the sheer economic impacts that the industry, the hospitality industry
Mhm.
provides, the number of jobs and the opportunities for this alchemy and planning such that you get all these various benefits, out of a single effort. And
Mhm.
so that's been our plan moving forward. And right now, in this moment in time, we don't believe that there is, kind of a better opportunity for that, or will there be a better opportunity to kind of shift to have a paradigm shift and shift the trajectory of the American hospitality worker, because there's a racial reconciliation, and it's typically the low income communities of color that are, most deeply impacted. And there is a way. We do see that there is a way. And so that's been our plan moving forward. And, I think we're getting more attention for that. And we'll kind of continue to do that.
Before you leave, I want to ask Jeremy, before you leave Randolph, but I'm going to ask Jeremy, how is it that you two came together? And to me, you're a perfect match for so many reasons.
Hey, can I start?
Okay, go for it.
I was laughing because I tell this story. I was at a policy research and advocacy organization here in Oakland, working on economic development, community safety and justice, education, really the pillars of strong, thriving communities. And Jeremy was the CEO of the largest community development corporation in this area. And so he came to meet with us, and he's talking about all these different ideas. And I always say this, we were sitting there like, is this guy nuts or what? He's like one of those, he's one of those, like thinkers.
Yes.
You're like, wow, is this guy nuts or what? And then you just sit and wait for it. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Right. And so it took us to catch up with Jeremy's thinking. Yeah. And so I've been, kind of practicing that as I move forward. But, I spent a lot of time at Laney College, which is across the street from this project. And that was one of those instances where, so we had been talking about different things over the course of some time about, and I think that the time that we were talking, it was about an idea to bring fresh produce to liquor stores in food deserts, right? And how I don't even know if you remember this, Jeremy, and how soda companies do it by, they'll give you a refrigerator, right? They'll give you a refrigerator for free, but then you have to stock it with their stuff, right? So how do we do that for fresh food and make sure that people, aren't like trying to eat rotten food in the liquor stores and that sort of thing? And so we were at Laney one day looking at the site, and he was like, yeah, we should put a hotel right there. Like, oh. And then I was like, no, it's not enough room. He was like, no, all you need is 60 feet. That's 100 right there. Build it tall, do this, connect it here, connect it there. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So that then became the project. And every time we presented it, people were like, that's a good idea right there. That one right there, that's a winner. That one's got legs, because it brought in the community college. Who's at community colleges, low-income communities of color. That workforce development is happening at the community colleges. How do you bake in all of the various career pathways that are that people are training for at community colleges? In this instance, we identified 6 career pathways that were attached to the hospitality industry, but above and beyond what people think of that front of the house stuff. And they're vital to the operation of a hospitality business. So doing the program is not additive, right? And we were able to bake it into the business model such that the program was paid for in perpetuity with above the line revenue, right? And so we didn't have to require grants to keep it going. And it was a significant amount of, annual contribution that it was going to take to maintain this workforce development program. But our investors were, they're like, yep, that's a good idea. So they were willing to take that, because I believe, and I think that we believe, that the benefits, are commensurate to that cost, and you'll just make a better project that people will, support. So, and I'm really sorry. I would love to talk about this.
Understood. You have to go. You got a time sensitive meeting. Jeremy will continue on.
I'll let Jeremy give you his and I'll watch the tape. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Webb.
you. Thank you. Jeremy, take it away. Oh, I can't hear you, Jeremy.
Sorry, I don't know if I remember that specific incident. But I do absolutely remember thinking to myself and realizing that Randolph was supremely well connected and just had relationships and contacts with all kinds of people. And I think it really matters that good ideas, are a dime a dozen, honestly, that do not exist unless you have a pathway to actually implementing them. And one of the things that is really important about being able to implement community benefits by design projects is actually having the right relationships to really draw on and build with. And I couldn't have imagined a better ally and partner in that in Randolph, because of his deep connections and ties to so many folks in the community, in business, in government. So that, yeah, when I do actually remember walking out that first time and saying, well, actually, that would fit a hotel right there. But I think that was the spark, because at the time, as you mentioned, the city was trying to address a revenue, a drain for them, because they were having to continuously maintain a certain property, the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center, and had no real plans for its use. And I think, to your point, there still really aren't any real plans, even though there's a developer going forward with something. And I will just comment that I think one of the challenges for doing work in a way that challenges the status quo is that it actually requires whoever has some kind of authority or decision-making role or position to actually have the imagination,
Yes,
to be able to understand and envision what might be different.
Yeah.
The failure of imagination is the thing, and it's a real, obstacle to transformative work. And I think that's kind of fundamentally what happened in this case, is that the sort of pragmatic realities of the status quo, or we ran into the pragmatic realities of the status quo, because the city required a level and radicalness to an imagination that they just didn't have. And
I want to stay there for a moment. The word imagination. And I remember you because the first time we met, you came into my office. I was president of Laney College. And you had this idea. And I was like, I like this guy. He's exactly in the zone. He's functioning in the paradigm that I love. And so I get it when Randolph says that people are looking like, who's this guy? Really? And then it took him a while to let it digest. Power is in when people are open enough to let it digest. And so you've got to be open when others are imagining. I don't know what book I've read that's seminal, whether it's by Carnegie himself or directly through one of his, I call him compadre, someone who was he was interviewed by, and that is the gentleman who wrote Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, who interviewed over 500 of the wealthiest people on the planet, thanks to Carnegie, who gave him that access. And it led to many, many books. And that one book was built on other books that predated it, that all convey the same thing. They all indicate there that imagination, short of imagination, you're not creating. You're basically replicating the status quo. And everything starts with imagination. And I make reference, whether it's this computer, it's Macintosh, if it wasn't someone thinking and even playing with the idea of an apple to actually engender it to people, we wouldn't even have it. If it wasn't someone thinking about, how to propel someone's voice, this mic wouldn't be here, or the light. I can go on and on and on. Imagination is so critical. And that's part of what you bring to the table always. And the challenge is when people are not open to something that is not so-called normal. And even if it's brilliant and they believe it's brilliant, there's a level of discomfort when you've not been exposed to that. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a bit? Because I know you've ran into that as a leader of different organizations.
Yeah, for sure. I remember distinctly the phases of conversations we had at the Community Development Corporation here in Oakland, when we were doing the strategic work of planning inside the organization to shift from a production oriented model of like, how many units are we producing, how many people are we serving, to a more like a social determinants of health model of looking at health outcomes as our North Star, our guiding sort of principle. And the first conversation when we brought it up was like, well, we're not a healthcare, we're not doctors. Why are we talking about this? And it's having to go back and say, oh wait, we didn't talk about it in the right way, because they think we're talking about being hiring a bunch of doctors or becoming healthcare workers. So we came back the second time and said, well, no, we're not talking about health, like taking care of people's health. We're talking about the health outcomes, right? So not health broadly, we're talking about health outcomes. And suffice it to say, it actually took 3 rounds of like honing the way we were talking about what we meant by health, in order to best convey and finally get people to understand that it was not about doctors, it was not about taking on like people's health care, but it was about how in some ways we were already, as a housing provider, responsible for the housing determinants of health, and that help people see, yeah, there are things that we do that relate to health. Here's a few examples that we are currently responsible for, but what else could we be responsible for because of the work that we do? I think what I'm trying to say is the imagination needs to be honed against the challenge of trying to convey it, right? That you can't simply rely on imagination. It's also the ability to communicate what you're imagining and the different ways you can do that, I think, that are necessary. I will also say that I think U.S. society now currently valorizes imagination and radical imagination from white men mostly, and even the realm of imagination is not free from the kind of institutions and society we've built where that is essentially a white supremacist context, where anything that's positive and the way we value that and support it when done by the white males is more easy to accept, right? So even if it is really radical, even if it is really forward thinking, whereas the kind of imagination it has taken for Black Americans to survive 400 years of 400 years of slavery, oppression, and whatnot is easily, and to this day, and still survive that, is easily up there with the kind of radical and successful imagination that of any other kind of innovation that's ever existed in the U.S. Never mind jazz, right? To start with jazz as a starting point, and the American, distinctly Black American invention of jazz. But so I think the context for how imagination can be applied is, as much constrained by our ability to even imagine that folks who are not white can actually have really amazing, credible imaginations that can really transform society.
And in fact, you gave an excellent example of where Black folks, have not only have imagination, but demonstrate it through the legacy of thriving in the midst of the constraints that are there structurally, socially, and otherwise. And I know, based upon my experiences with family, with history, with research, that the same can be said for all other major groups of color, whether we're talking about Asians, we're talking about Pacific Islanders, we're talking about Latinos or Latinas, we're talking about Native Americans, we're talking about folks from other countries who come here and they either adopt being white and they're clearly not, or they adopt being Asian when they're more diverse than that, whatever. There is a predisposition to discount, and yet the power of what we talk about in this show is to recognize that each one of us as individuals and as part of groups of individuals and through our cultural predispositions demonstrate the power of imagination, resilience, and overall creation. And we talk about here wealth as a subject on a regular basis because it's so critical. And you two have talked about it without using some of those terms. When you talk about social determinants of health, you're talking about this whole category of overall fitness, not just physical fitness, mental fitness, spiritual fitness. And then we talk about family. I mentioned purposely the fact that you have wives and you have children, and you're responsible in that area. Your wives are responsible, your children are. That is so powerful to wealth creation. And without those two, if you have family, if you have your bodies, which we all have, we inhabit these bodies, hopefully they're in healthy conditions. And then there's the area of faith. Do we have faith? Well, I would suggest that every one of us, without exception, really does have faith. We have faith in something, as a dear one, Tomoko says. It doesn't matter what the faith is. We all have faith in something. And the key thing is being clear about that faith and understanding that it's something that we've adopted or we've created, and we should honor it if it's valuable. If it doesn't work for us, change it, like values. If respect works for us, keep it. Integrity works for us, keep it. If something that we've taken on as a value, which is mistrust or distrust, it doesn't work for us, get rid of it through habit. The other part is, of course, finance and fun. So talk to me a little bit about, I'm going to go off script a second and we're going to come back here. I think we have some questions. So talk to me about how you and Randolph together through your business embed those aspects as you're building wealth. Oh, I think you're frozen. Oh, I think we lost Jeremy. I'm sure he'll come back. In the meantime, let me take one of the questions as he will log back in. And Jet, who's in the background, one of my key leads out of the Philippines, can you send him a note letting him know that he's back in?
Sorry,
Wonderful.
my internet got.
Oh, that's okay. It happens. So did you hear that question?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Well, wait, do you mind repeating? Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So I mentioned wealth and that it has these 5 key components that I and many like me have adopted. And that is, and we believe that you don't have wealth if you're missing one of these key components. And that is fitness, family, fitness, of course, being health, well-being, overall mental, physical, spiritual, family, whether they're your family you create, family you were born into, of course, fun, finance, and faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're really laying out what I really, really appreciate is a much, much more accessible description of what the social determinants of health are. Never mind the social determinants of health, the sort of professionalized language of it all. What you lay out really are the key pieces of how, in a lot of ways, wealth really needs to exist and be thought of in this country. And because if it's not, and it's solely seen as a monetary thing, which it generally is in the mainstream, you actually get back to the unit economics, right? The challenge, right, of how we all make that kind of monetary analysis in our lives. Like, well, if I spend, like, how much is my time worth? Is it worth it to me to do this job or this task or this thing, and how much can I get out of it? But if we don't start to really understand that wealth is a construct of these 5 dimensions that you describe, I think we completely fall into that trap of it all being about financial unit economics, and we miss out on the mutuality questions. We miss out on how our wealth and how we take care of our neighbors, our community, the people we see, however we define it, right, is going to be missing. As in a really specific example of that, the greatest source of resiliency for people in the United States is not the government. It's not a nonprofit. It's not, some kind of like job that they have. It's actually their relations, right? Their personal family or neighbor or whatever it is. It's their cohort of connections that they have around them. And we don't understand that enough. We don't understand how that plays into, well, we have ideas, but we haven't translated those into the systems and structures of society that are really going to be needed in order to like build resiliency and wealth in communities. A really good example of that is in the housing, the mainstream sort of housing world. It generally atomizes all the systems of policies and regulations, atomizes the nuclear family into like these households, these nuclear households.
That's right.
2 parents, a couple of kids, right? And even if you want to do so much as deviate from that, just by saying, hey, my parents are going to support us with a down payment, you have to fill out all this extra paperwork. It's essentially seen with a lot of suspicion, right? Where's this money coming from? Are you trying to cheat the system? Like, what's the meaning of this extra money? And whereas the reality is the vast majority of like the way we cope with the needs in our developmental stages in life and all these things have to do with drawing from those types of resources. That's a really specific example, right, of like how we atomize things into this artificial construct that does not define wealth in the way you've defined it. Another proactive example, I think, would be, if you take it right on faith that like people do draw and rely on their siblings or their parents or whatever, it's financial, social, emotional support, borrowing a car, having a conversation, taking care of the kids, whatever it is. What system do we see now that exists that we could adapt to make it more purposeful, right? To have even a public policy system have a community benefit by design, not just a transactional thing of like, how do we provide enough financial housing support to an individual nuclear household so that they can affordably rent a home? And I'm referring to the Section 8 program, which is the voucher program that many rely on. That covers part of your rent, right? If you're a low income household. Well, there's nothing in the regs that say that we can't utilize those beyond the typical nuclear household that we currently think of as how the program runs. And this actually gets back to that imagination, right? We're so constrained by our imagination about how that program can run that all we can think of is like, well, how do we get more of those vouchers out to more households? When one of the things that we've thought about a lot is maybe we need to find a way for people to get those in clusters or cohorts or bundles, right? So that, imagine, for instance, 3 siblings who are all signed up on the lottery or the wait list for these vouchers, and they all list each other as part of their support network or their support cohort or whatever it is. And if any one of them gets picked for a voucher, all of them get vouchers at the same time, so that they could all at least have a chance of going to different apartment complexes or landlords and say, hey, all 3 of us want to rent at the same time so that we can live in proximity to one another. Because that's the fundamental, we need to be supporting the fundamental unit of social support, not atomizing them so that, well, you get one now, so you have to go make a decision. And then once your sibling gets one later, there may not be vacancy at that apartment building, so you might not be able to move in there. And then right there, you've actually broken apart sort of the systems that people rely on, and that's wealth. That the systems that people rely on that equate to wealth. So we really have to bring that forward more. And I think this ties back to the topic, right? Because that the way people live together and rely on each other, that's culture too,
Yes.
right? And that needs to shape the systems of the economy. It has to shape the systems of justice in sort of the U.S.
When you use the words, we've got about 7 questions, and we're supposed to end in 6 minutes. And I want to apologize to so many of you who have questions. Let me just at least allow Tomoko's statement here. Here, you can read it. Jeremy talked about racial bias and how it impacts people of color. She really liked that, especially present creative, innovative, and radical solutions for our economy. However, better received among people presenting these things if they're part of the status quo. And Hawa, earlier on, thank you for being here. And it's an honor to also always have you as part of the audience. And I'm so pleased that these shows are powerful. And it's because of guests like Jeremy and Randolph and others. And so can you bring up at least one of the first questions, Jet? Thinking about taking actions as a business executive in tech to transform influential Silicon Valleys across the country, where inequities seem to be built into our fabric. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think acknowledging that a developmental step, right, into recognizing like different imaginations, so to speak, or different creativity from different cultures and different communities is actually knowing that sometimes you don't need a interpreter. You just need to empower the person who can recognize those things with the resources, right? So I think it's valid, right? A lot can be lost in translation, right? And that's because there's even the act of having to translate becomes this differential and this power dynamic. And I think being able to like empower the folks who are the ones who see those directly as patterns can be a really important step. I remember a while ago, this is not about tech per se, but I think it applies, pitching an idea to real estate and fund managers about a concept of how you could find sort of community sweat equity value in the way you looked for places to make investments. And whenever I was talking to or pitching to someone who was Asian American, they instantly got it. They're like, oh yeah, my cousin's uncles, whatever, so-and-so does exactly that thing. Or whenever, they could really intuitively understand it because of their lived experience. Whenever I was pitching to someone who was not Asian American, they had no idea what I was talking about and couldn't understand why this even made what they thought they were in that moment of maybe not listening deeply enough, right? To your point earlier, Dr. Webb. But to me, that illustrates this idea that you have to like really understand who can see and understand that creativity or that innovation and resource them.
And to your point, you have to not assume that there's a one-off. You do it, you share the idea in a different way, another time, until it's got, it reminds me of marketing. A lot of folks go to the grocery store. They don't even know why they're picking up Clorox. It's because they've heard Clorox over and over and over and over in commercials, and they just believe they've got to buy this product. They get home, they're like, why did I buy that product? They have been so wired. That's what most of us are doing on a daily basis. We're operating at the subconscious level, not knowing that the subconscious level, that emotional mind, drives 95 to 99% of our behavior. We think we're consciously making decisions when in fact we know scientifically that's not the case.
Yeah.
And the way you shift that is to literally use your mental faculties to shift and go and use different habits to shift. Next question. And I want to say something about the person who asked the executive. You've got a vision, go for it. Leverage that imagination. Share it with others, through others, in different ways. Things change because we foster that change. directly and indirectly. So you have power that goes beyond just the you. The power of the social context is invaluable.
I mean, Dr. Webb, just to add to that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think one specific example I would say to point to is my colleagues over at Beta Boom, who are a seed stage tech investment fund that is what they call always looking for new patterns. And by that, they mean new patterns of like innovation, creativity. And I would go look at their work because I think they are trying to pioneer sort of one, looking outside of Silicon Valley, but then two, looking for that new pattern of who are the kinds of and places where you find innovation. So Beta Boom. And then one other place I would look is there's a really lot of interesting work around something called positive deviance. It's by looking at where there are things that are deviant relative to the background norm, but have really positive outcome. And there's a lot of literature about that work.
Yeah, it reminds me of the literature around the power of it's not detractor, disruptor. Yeah. This question is curious. What is value? What is a priority? It makes me think of a priority, right? What is an example of a historical practice that resulted in an inequity that we are witnessing now?
Oh my God, that's a huge,
I know.
huge question. You know, I mean, I would almost put it in the obverse as an answer, which is what is a historic practice that has not resulted in an equity that we're witnessing now? Because I think it would be easier to do that.
Yes.
Than pick what thing, because I struggle to think of any system that we have now that has been a historical practice that has not resulted in inequity. Oh, you know what? I will say, and to give a shout out to the founder of PolicyLink,
yes,
Angela Glover Blackwell, who has a podcast called
remarkable.
Radical Imagination now, so definitely look that up. Who really lifted up the idea that the curb cut effect of the Americans for Disabilities Act. It really is a go-to example of how a historical practice that is relatively recent, certainly, has actually created a positive move away from inequity as a result. And that's the idea that while the American Disabilities Act mandated curb cuts in sidewalks to accommodate folks who are in wheelchairs, has actually had an effect on supporting local commerce. And by that is like the folks who do deliveries and the using the hand trucks to make deliveries now actually can do that more easily and more effectively. Or families, right? So kids pushing kids around in strollers, right? Or and other types of uses, right? So the curb cut effect is an example of historic practice that has not just not resulted in inequity, but actually has ameliorated past inequities, right? Ameliorated equities amongst other communities as well.
I love that. If you have a few moments, we'll take another question.
Sure.
I've known these guys for a long time. That's cool. They are as authentic as you can get. But brothers, are you saying that we can eliminate racism?
Wow, I wonder who that question is from. I don't actually think you can eliminate racism per se. I actually think the fundamental evolutionary behavioral cause of it is not is not something. I mean, eventually, maybe after another 2,000 years or more, or 10,000 years of being around, we can evolve our way out of it. But I think that there's a lot we can do, and I think that at all levels, right? The macro to me is you have to make real estate development and systems purposeful that accommodate multiple cultural like practices and patterns, right? That's one way of eliminating racism that is institutionalized, right? And one way of thinking about it is if we could have culture in all policies, like a way of seeing culture in every way we think about writing or designing policies, that can go a long way to reducing or eliminating institutionalized racism, because you actually have a lens on difference when you're designing policy I think at the micro, I think I think there are a lot of things that we can do that can eliminate racism that are developmental. You know, you're capturing both developmentally individuals like young children, you know, living in diverse communities, you know, making the choice to do that. I think to the point about tech earlier, I think one very specific concrete thing would be venture capital firms literally making a choice to making a suboptimal investment decision in Black and POC entrepreneurs. And by a suboptimal, I mean it might not be the right round, it might not be the right valuation for their like sort of their standard book of investments, but figuring out like, you know what, in order to be eliminate racism, we can't just try to like talk more about racism. We have to build into our practices, not only looking for like new patterns that we talked about before externally, but also like recognizing the patterns that we've that ourselves hold on to and propagate, and figuring out how do we disrupt those patterns internally into the way that we make choices and decisions. Because I think one of the best ways for venture capital firms to eliminate racism in venture capital firms is going to be for them to make a lot more investments in like Black and POC entrepreneurs, right? Because they will directly have an experience of somebody who's different from them. And so the more we can do that, I think we can actually make steps towards eliminating racism.
And by POC, you mean people of color.
People of color, totally, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Latino, Latina founders, trans, queer, dreamers. I mean, like if somebody hadn't started a seed stage investment fund for dreamers, i.e., children who were brought to the U.S. by their parents and are out of immigration, don't have a formalized immigration status. If you want to like look for where people have a really powerful imagination about how to like think about changing things in the world that can be a really effective like way of making, you know, actual like tool for making money, like what you should be investing in like startup ideas that dreamers have, because they will have been conditioned and grown up in a very different, very different sort of mindset than what the typical like entrepreneur in Silicon Valley has.
Okay, Jet, another, and I'm going to honor, maybe go to 15 after the hour. Is that okay? Is it possible to achieve justice? Also, really sounds like a
you know, I say this with like loving perspective on having spent the last 6 years with PolicyLink. Not if we don't move past thinking about equity in specific sectors or arenas like just housing or just transportation or just health, that we have to, well, let me just say the path to justice absolutely has to runs through this place called equity, racial equity. But we have to actually move beyond the kinds of focus on like topical areas of equity and really move to like relational ones. And the biggest one that the US is dealing with now is how we relate to each other fundamentally through the structures of democracy. And I'll say that the relatively new CEO of PolicyLink, Michael McAfee, I think really has been shaping a focus on the structures of democracy, which in essence are the way we are in relationship to one another. We need to move our focus into that level if we're to achieve justice, because justice isn't achieved at the topical issue area level. It's achieved at the level where we're fundamentally understanding and changing the way we relate to one another. And that's this thing called democracy, and it's actually broken right now.
That's a whole
other
session.
Yeah.
We should have a session and maybe even invite him to get deeply into that, because in our respective leadership roles, we're influencing that. whether we decide to just say hands off, I'm okay with the policies as they are because they work for me, or I'm working in a particular area, we're all influencing either sustaining the status quo or shifting it slightly or overhauling it significantly. Next question, Jet. This show, Lead Live, focuses on how to lead, enhance mindset, and create sustainable wealth. Yes. Do we want to change the economic landscape if we are already successful?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I think you're really pointing at that the reality, right? That in my community, in the Asian, broadly speaking, the Asian American community, or even, and you can see this in the Black community or any community that is otherwise, as a whole, not achieving sustainable wealth. There are individuals, there are institutions that are standing up and reinforcing the status quo because there's the status quo is what has enabled them to achieve what they have been able to gather to themselves, and that's not that's understandable, right? And that's it's important to understand it if we are to achieve systems change. We have to understand and recognize that that is a reality for many folks. Unfortunately, it's not enough of a reality for enough folks, and that's why the systems need to be changed.
And actually, for the majority of folks, let's be very
clear. That's right. Absolutely.
How many millions of people
That's right.
are still out of jobs, and
that's right.
They're not people of color. Yeah. They're whites. And how many folks historically, the vast majority of poor people are, because of the numbers, are white. So we have a tendency of wiring, thinking if you're Black, you're automatically poor. Well, that particular person may be wearing some holes in the jeans, but may be vastly wealthy. Or this Asian person in the same conditions, or this Latino, or this Native American. Your generalizing statements are 100% accurate. And I just want the viewing audience to remember those folks who are poor, they don't care really about their skin tone, whether they're white or otherwise. They care about feeding their families and taking care of business. Unfortunately, there's a predisposition in this country to just be more negating and undermining of anything that supports people of color. And so we want to eliminate that.
Yeah, because if you can eliminate that, you actually can benefit not just people of color, but also poor whites in the U.S. And I think, again, back to what the kind of like focus that Michael McAfee has brought to PolicyLink and is trying to bring to the rest of the equity movement of really holding us to account for ourselves, to account for a result for folks. And he's really helped us see that by doing that, we can be more effective. And the population that PolicyLink is committing to is those in America, in the U.S., who live at or below 200% of the poverty line. And pre-COVID, that was about 100 million Americans. So 1 in 3 Americans approximately were living at or below 200% of the poverty line. And now, of course, that's probably more like 125 million or so. So, and that out of that 100 million is
and let's
not
put in perspective, how many millions of people are in this country?
Yeah, so 300 plus or so million.
Yeah.
So, like, again,
So
1 in
people
3.
get the overall number in addition to the percentage that you indicate. So the
Right.
people
Right. And so that's to your point earlier, this current economic systems are not working, even if they're working for a few, because clearly they're not working for 1 in 3 Americans right now.
Okay. Wonderful. Last question, Jet, if there's any others. I think there is. I think we probably answered that, but maybe you want to take.
No, I think it's a good question to ask because a lot of the framing, Dr. Webb, on our prep call with you, me and Randolph, we talked a lot about how there's this thing called arts and culture, which is a sort of, in some ways, a proper noun construction of a type of thing that people think about, like the fine art museums or the ballet, or even the like African dance troupe, which is, formally constituted as like an entity or an arts and cultural entity or institution. Whereas when we say cultures here, we really want to make sure that we're emphasizing that the not just the formal but the informal, the way people live, the way people relate to each other. And the examples are everything from the way people save money is actually culturally inflected. It's a cultural practice. And this is like in many communities, right? There's these lending circles or saving circles that are culturally defined practices, but that are actually across many different cultures. But also to things like the way expression happens in communities, right? That whether it's more verbal or visual, or these are the types of fine-grained nuance that we have to, again, make sure is built into policy change, because that's essential if we're going to really be able to design policies that are both serve many, many more people, and not just a narrow band of our conception of who benefits from this policy that we're writing, but also more resilient, because by the notion that we can even serve more, be effective for more people with one policy, means that you will be serving a broader swath of the population.
I always enjoy just listening to you, Jeremy. And we've benefited from you and Randolph today, just cutting to the chase and explaining the power of really designing in a practice, a policy up front, mutual benefits, community benefits. So I want to thank you and look forward to having further discussions with you. And if you're open to that.
Absolutely. Likewise. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I feel so much more grounded always. And it's always about being purposeful, being mindful. These gentlemen operate with intentionality, or they're with purpose. They're clear about the ends they want to achieve, and they're more likely to get there because of that level of clarity. And their brotherhood, their collaborative way of functioning is a gift in and of itself to society. So thank you, Jeremy, and I'll talk with you soon.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
It's an honor. So, Jet, we have another presentation of, and actually discussion next week. Dr. Martin Quinde and I will be focused. We're always focused on wealth creation. He demonstrates through lived experiences, and I add my value to what he and so many other people are doing, and I should say we're doing. And the talk next week is about how to be all in. Decide on X, like Jeremy and Randolph, and at the infancy, they were all in. They didn't just decide we're interested, we're going to put our hats in and do a one-pager. No, they went all in. They talked to investors across the country. They talked to individuals in the community. They went all in and created a comprehensive plan and also a video to go with it. It was remarkable. Well, that's what you do when you want success. And many of you know that who are viewing this. I'm thinking about Sherlyn, who's watching this on her television, Sherlyn Chu, who's a remarkable woman. Many years ago, she had this vision as a child. She had this vision that grew, and when she was an adult, she chose to manifest it. And everyone told her from when she was a child, don't even do that. That's a waste of time. And then as she became an adult, why are you doing that? That's a waste of time. Now they're like, my goodness, this is awesome. You did it. It's great. We may have her on the show if she's interested. And her son, they're doing remarkable things in preparing young people and adults for a whole brilliant world. I'm going to leave it at that because I want you to really want to know more. But next week, Dr. Quinde and I will talk about the importance of being all in. You make a decision, you go for it. And you make certain that that goal, whatever that goal is, it was a reflection of a fantasy dream, a real powerful dream, so that that goal is worthy of you, not you worthy of the goal. Hear the words. The goal is worthy of you. Thank you so much for joining us. We went a little bit over, but we could. And you get to watch this anytime you want, more than once. There are a lot of gems. It's an honor. See you next Wednesday.